Hey everyone, welcome back to the Coop with Meyer Hatchery, where we talk all things poultry in hopes of educating chicken keepers and inspiring future flock owners. I'm Jess, and today we have a really special guest, and I feel like I need some music for you. We have the president of Chickenlandia, Dalia. Welcome to the Coop.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. This is really exciting for me. So thank you.
Wonderful. Oh, we're so happy to have you. And I know, as being the lead hand of Meyer Hatchery's YouTube channel, we see your videos all the time and our viewers always talk about them. So this is really exciting for me too to be able to talk with you today.
Yay.
Yay. All right. So before we get started on these great questions that we have for you, what is Chickenlandia and how did you come up with that name?
Oh gosh, there's so many layers to this story. But I'll tell you the simple version. Well, it's not that simple, but so I used to have a farm store. My husband and I were co-owners of a farm store here in Bellingham, Washington. Actually, it was in Linden, which is like the town just north of us. And there was like a chicken section in the farm store, and it was called Chickenlandia.
Yeah.
But the way that that name came about is my dad was from Guatemala.
Okay.
Both my parents are Guatemala. My dad has passed away, but both my parents are from Guatemala. And he used to listen to shortwave radio when I was a kid. So every morning I would wake up and I would hear like this like
Yeah.
static, and then an announcer would come in and the announcer would go, well, these marimba band would start playing, because in
Okay.
Guatemala the like the indigenous music is marimba. And
Mhm.
so that would start playing, and then an announcer would come on and say Chapinlandia. And in Guatemala the colloquial term for Guatemalans is chapin.
Okay.
So, Chapin land is like Guatemalan land, like the land of Chapins. So it's kind of a nod to my heritage and how I grew up. And when I grew up in a suburb of Dallas.
Mhm.
Um, I was kind of caught between two worlds because I was a child of immigrants and I didn't quite fit in that arena, and I also didn't quite fit in, at school. Um, so Chickenlandia is a place where everyone is welcome. It's where everyone fits in. It's where you find out who you are. So that's why it's called Welcome to Chickenlandia,
Love it.
and it's the name of basically my chicken yard.
Aw, I
It
love
would
that so
Yeah.
much. I love that. Oh my goodness. So you kind of said it, I think, but what is the mission of Chickenlandia?
I really would of course, there's a million backyard chicken educators out there. Like, I knew that coming into it. But what has been in my heart from the beginning is to help people understand that, you're not just keeping chickens. There's meaning to it. And we're so disconnected from our food. It's really a way from our food and also from our culture, because when we're disconnected from food, it's automatically a disconnection from culture as well. So when we kind of reconnect with that and reawakening that part of ourselves, we learn about who we are. When we know more about who we are more compassionate towards other people. So I just want to spread that peace, love, and joy
Yeah.
about chickens, because to me, it's like it's brought me so much peace in my life, and it's brought meaning into my life, and I want to share that with people. And usually people get it. Like when I tell them, "Oh, it's I feel so much peace in the chicken yard. I feel so much joy in the chicken yard." And they're like, "Yeah, yeah."
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to save the world one chicken at a time.
Oh, that is so great. So great. And it is so true. It is being out in the yard with the chickens. That is just it's calming. I love going out there and just sitting with our feathered friends. It's so great. So let's talk about your first flock. So, what is the reason you got into raising chickens? How did you come about having your flock?
Okay, I apologies to all the people that have heard this story before because I told it so many times, but I'm gonna tell it again. I before we moved to Bellingham, I was living in, Los Angeles. I was working as a personal assistant. I was working at Lifetime Television for a little while, and I was trying to be a writer in the entertainment industry. I wanted to be like the next great American filmmaker, okay? Didn't quite turn out the way I wanted it to. That's okay. I met my future husband, we got married, and we decided, you know what? We don't wanna have kids. We don't wanna raise kids in LA. Nothing against LA, but I was pretty much over the traffic by that point.
Yeah, I bet.
So, yeah, it's brutal. So, we moved to Bellingham, Washington, and when that happened, I had made, like, a conscious decision, this is what we're doing, this is the direction that my life is going in, and my husband can do he's still in the entertainment industry, but he can do his job wherever he is. But I had to kind of let that go, and I really felt like I was okay with that. Well, I had my first baby. I was totally in love with my baby. I was loving being a wife. I was loving raising my child. But I had a pretty intense case of postpartum depression. And I didn't even know that that is what I was experiencing because people don't talk about it. And when you're a mom, you just kind of like soldier through. And so that's what I was doing. But I just kept having these feelings of like, what is my identity now? And then I was feeling like this real loss of my dreams and a loss of who I am. And I was really going through a hard time. So naturally, I was like, I'm going to get some chickens.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was it. I don't know why that was what I thought, but it
Mhm.
was. I feel like
Yeah,
it was divine intervention, honestly.
absolutely.
So I did a whole bunch of research and everything, went to the store, got my little bag of baby chicks. They were in a paper sack. 10 little baby chicks.
Yeah,
Went there to get 6, came home with 10.
yeah.
Um, and I'm taking them out of the bag and putting them into the brooder that I had set up for them, and I just say that at that moment, my heart opened and a new dream came in,
That's
and I
amazing.
became so passionate about these little creatures. I'm not saying that they cure postpartum depression, but I will say that I believe that's when I started to heal, because I got a new purpose.
Yeah.
And I wasn't
Yeah.
I wasn't consciously looking for it, but because of that experience, it just kind of opened me up to that. And then it was like a boulder rolling down a hill, nobody was gonna stop it. Eventually, I was teaching classes, I was doing seminars, and then I did a TEDx talk at Western
Mhm.
Washington University called "I Dream of Chickens,"
Oh, I love it.
because I do.
Mm.
Um, and then I started my YouTube channel, and that was kind of it. When the YouTube channel started, then it really started to take off.
That's great.
So here I am, the president of Chickenlandia, self-appointed.
That is so great. So great. Such a, it is, I feel like it is so important to find that your passion, and sometimes it shows up in the most interesting ways. And yeah, chickens definitely, they definitely show up at the right time. I would say that they definitely
They
show up at the
do.
right time in your life, and that is really wonderful.
Yeah, I kind of think of them as as kind of a rite of passage.
Yeah.
They kind of ushered me into adulthood, even though I was married. I was 36. I was married. I had a baby. I was still kind of lost.
Yeah.
And that was really the thing that kind of settled me down. And, because you gotta, there's no, world hopping, after you have chickens.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
travel. You can travel, but you have to be grounded.
Yeah.
It really does
Absolutely.
ground you.
Yep.
So, I think that's, um it really helped me to grow up, and I needed to. I needed
Okay.
to grow up really fast. I had a child. I
Yeah.
needed to accept the life that I had. Um, and at the same time, in doing that, I found out what my real passion is. Who knew?
Yeah. Yeah, that is awesome. So awesome. So, speaking of chickens, it's hard to pick, but what is your favorite breed?
Okay, people ask me this all the time. I tell my chickens, "I love you all the same." Uh, You all have special things about you, and I love you each in your own special way.
Right.
But I really love tiny, itty bitty tiny chickens, like Old English game, like
Oh, yeah.
really small, and they're super chatty and they're flighty. Um, so most of the time they're a little bit more tame, but they're
Yeah.
still kind of, I don't know, they've got like a little bit more of a wild side to them. And just tiny little chickens, and I just love that. So I would say probably Old English game bantams, and I love anything with a naked neck.
Yeah. Yeah, those are definitely interesting. We got our first naked neck chickens a couple of years ago, and it definitely took me some time of it's okay. You're supposed to look like that.
Yeah. Yes. I love them, I love them.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, our personally my flock is about 2/3 small birds. So I
Yeah.
could totally agree with the I love the bantams and the silkies and all that. All those are really
Yeah,
tiny birds. But I do tell my birds the same thing. I love you all, but
exactly.
these are my favorite over here. Aw. So speaking of our little chickens, it's March here at Meyer Hatchery, so it is our March hatch along. So we're talking all about hatching chicks and brooding our chicks after they hatch. Do you have a favorite incubator that you like to use?
Well, I wanna start out and say I am not an expert when it comes to, hatching chicks in an incubator. It's just not my niche. I
Okay.
feel like it's basically a niche in itself, like, there's so much information that goes into doing that, and I just don't have the expertise in that arena. It's just not what I do. That being said, of course, because I am in the field that I'm in, I hear a lot about incubating chicks, and I think what seems to me is the best one are the Brincy ones. They're just
Mhm.
very user friendly.
Yeah.
They're fun. They look cute, and they're you can see the chicks really easy. And certainly if you're raising them like in a classroom setting or with little kids, it's just fun to like watch the eggs every single day. And I think there's a lot of work that it does for you.
Mhm.
Um, so if you're starting out, that's probably the best place to start. And I do have a lot of friends that are very into hatching eggs and they love the Brincy one. So that's what I'm gonna go with.
Yeah, that is a really, really great incubator. So have you incubated before?
I have not used an incubator before.
My goodness. I think you have to put that on your list.
You know what? I have to be so I rescue a lot of chickens, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying, that's what anyone has to do because,
Yeah.
the people that watch me, they're not having a chicken rescue.
Yeah.
I feel like chickens rescued me, and
Right.
so I'm rescuing them.
That's great.
And because of that, I have to be really careful about my rooster to hen ratio. Um, I have a hard time giving up chickens once they come into Chickenlandia. I've also adopted chickens from everywhere, so there's a lot of disclosure that needs to happen if I were to rehome chickens or rehome a rooster because it is very likely that I mean, I know that disease has passed through my flock before, so I have to be really responsible about that. So, because that's kind of the place that I've occupied in the chicken world, it's like if I hatch out baby chicks, you're going to end up with roosters, and right
Yeah.
now I have 3 roosters anymore, and one of them's really kind of a jerk. So it's like, I don't need any more jerks right now.
Right. Exactly. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that though, that Yeah, we joke sometimes about chicken math and how many chickens we bring in, but you do have to really watch. Know your coop, know
Mhm.
your setup. You don't want to have too many roosters and that kind of good stuff. So it is important to be very responsible to be a responsible chicken keeper.
Yes, it's super fun to talk about chicken math. I love talking about chicken math. I've certainly fallen prey to chicken math, but especially in the city and the suburbs, which a lot of my
Mhm.
audience is in the city and suburbs,
Yeah.
you have to be so careful about overcrowding, and a lot of the problems that you see when you have chickens in an enclosed run especially, are because they just don't have enough to do. There's too many chickens in a small space, and that's something that I just don't want people to have to deal with that, and I don't want chickens to have to deal with that. So it is an important thing to think about.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your rescuing the chickens. Can you share some tips for biosecurity when you're bringing a new chicken into your coop?
Well, a lot of it is acceptance, like, because there, of course, there is biosecurity. There are measures that you can take to try and limit the exposure to your existing flock. And for those of you that maybe don't know what I'm talking about, there are chicken diseases out there, and whenever you bring in new chickens into your flock, especially if it's adult chickens, you are risking spreading disease into your flock, and sometimes that can be really devastating. So it is always something to consider. Like, you need to ask yourself, what am I willing to deal with? What am I willing to experience? If you're the kind of person that every time a chicken gets sick and dies, you really, really struggle with that, and it really affects you. It affects me. I will say it affects me, but, like, in a way that it is makes you maybe non-functional. I mean, there are people that would really struggle with that. Know yourself, and if that is something you cannot handle, then you should not bring older chickens into your flock. Usually you'll be okay bringing in new baby chicks. There are some things to consider even with that, but the biggest risk is just bringing in adult chickens, or chickens that have been outside with another flock. They might be adolescents, but they're outside with another flock, into your flock. Okay. And people talk about, a lot of educators will say, oh, you need to quarantine for 30 days. That's really hard for a lot of people, especially if they have limited space. So we have to give them options. In my book, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, but I do talk about some things that you can do to hopefully mitigate some problems that can happen when you bring new birds into your flock, especially if you're not able to quarantine. Some people can quarantine for a little while, but they can't do the full 30 days. It would just, be a bad situation for the new birds if they don't have a lot of room. Um, but even with quarantine, there are diseases that chickens can carry, and they have immunity. They themselves have immunity, and they're not affected by that disease. But if they bring it into your existing flock can be affected by it. The other thing is that your flock could have immunity to something, and then you bring in these new birds and you've quarantined them for 30 days, and they look great. You bring them into your flock, and there's a different strain of coccidiosis in your flock that your existing chickens are immune to, and the new birds catch it.
Um,
So those are things that you really have to think about. Now, above all else, the best thing that you can do for your bird's health, for your flock's health, is to not, keep them stress free. So they need to have enough space. They need to have the right, good nutrition. Um, they should not be under threat of predation all the time. You just want them to have a good foundation so that they have the resilience to overcome all the normal things in the environment that they may be introduced to, because a strong healthy bird is going to be introduced to literally trillions of things in the environment, and all these things in the microbiome that are made to build resilience, with gradual exposure and all that. So make sure your birds are outside, they're scratching the earth, they're getting that exposure. Don't be afraid. Don't build a Fort Knox so that they never have exposure to the outside world. That is actually doing a disservice to your flock, because you're bringing down their level of immunity. You want them to have gradual exposure. I say all the time, baby chick, and I'm kind of rambling here, but just stop me. Chickens, I just go. But I will say all the time, baby chicks raised by a mother hen in a chicken yard, okay? As soon as they're fluffed out, she's taking them out into the chicken yard, and they are eating goodness knows what. They are, exposed to everything. They're exposed to the droppings of the other chickens, of the whole flock. And usually baby chicks raised by a mother hen they're just going to be more resilient than those that you raise yourself. And I'm not saying don't hand raise baby chicks, because it is so fun. And a lot of times, that's the option that people have. Right. And I'm all about giving people options. But the best thing that you can do for baby chicks and for your chickens is to expose them to nature. Even baby chicks, I encourage people, if the weather's good, take them outside, be with them, be their mother hen, give them that gradual exposure. Don't be afraid of that. When we shield them from nature, that kind of thinking really comes through the funnel of factory farms, because in those conditions, they have to be shielded from everything because they're super stressed out. Yeah. But in your backyard, they're not. They have an opportunity to live a nice, normal life, the kind of life a chicken's supposed to live. So don't be afraid to expose them. And I don't even know where we started with that, but that's where I'm ending.
No, it's such great information. And I agree. If I have a broody and I can give them some chicks and let them raise them,
yeah,
it's amazing. It's even having the chicks, or the mother hen hatch the chicks from, start all the way to finish. There is a little bit of a difference. We kind of joke around here that the ones that were raised by the mother hen, they're a little bit more tough, because I'm not, kind of babying them as much when they're in the house. So no, I completely agree. And it is great once you can take your chicks out and give them, I call it playtime, and just watching them, how they instinctively know to start digging around, or those little tiny dust bathing areas. And
yes,
it's
they're
so
already
great.
they're tiny, but they're already they're chickening,
Yes.
they're already doing the little tiny chicken thing, and it's so adorable.
Exactly.
And I will say, I have hatched out, I have had a mother hen hatch out chicks, and raise baby chicks. So and that is just, it's a delightful experience.
Absolutely. Do you have any tips for anybody that is hatching chicks underneath a broody hen? Anything you've learned in your experience?
Well, if you're putting eggs under them, obviously they need to be fertilized. You got to find fertilized eggs if you don't have a rooster. If you have a rooster, they are very likely fertilized. If we know anything about roosters, we know they're good at one thing. So definitely you want to take a pencil, not a pen, not a marker, but a pencil, and mark the eggs that you want the mother hen to hatch, because if she's just in the chicken yard with your flock, then other chickens will go and lay eggs where she is, and it can get really confusing really fast. And you don't want to have, baby chicks developing at different stages under a mother hen. A lot of people get concerned about the safety of the baby chicks, when they're being hatched within the flock. And that is a legitimate concern, especially if the mother hen is inexperienced, or if you have them in a place, let's say they're up in they're in a nesting box and it's up off the ground. If the baby chick falls out of the nesting box, that's, goodbye to that baby chick. It's not a good scenario. So what you can do is, if you can kind of separate them from the flock, but the flock can still see them, they can still see the flock. The flock will see when mother hen comes out with the baby chicks. And you can kind of gauge where they're at with the mother hen and the babies. And if they're ignoring them, which more times than not, they will just ignore the babies. And if they get anywhere near those babies, depending on mama hen, where she is on the pecking order, she will fiercely defend them. And even if she's low on the pecking order, she'll try. But if she's very low, she might, she might not do well. So it's all about kind of looking at the personality of your whole flock, knowing the personality of your flock, knowing the personality of the mother hen. But usually after a day or two, you can let them out with the flock and they'll do fine. They really will ignore the baby chicks.
Yeah.
And it's, like I said, it's just so delightful having a mother hen with babies walking around the chicken yard. It's just, I mean, is there anything more delightful than that?
Mhm.
I mean, not to me.
Yeah, it's
There's no,
adorable. I love it. I love it. And
yeah.
that's such a great tip. If you really have to know your flock, know
Mhm.
your broody hen, and just watch her behavior, watch your flock's behavior, having that divider up. That's really helpful. I know that's helped a
Yes.
lot of people. Just while the flock's getting used to some new friends, but like you said, a lot of times they don't even notice that there's
Yeah,
little
they're
chicks
just
in
like,
there. My favorite is the chicks when I've seen them like jump on my broody hen's back, and then she just
yes,
like takes them around. I just think
it's
that's
an
so
Uber.
adorable. I loved.
Yes.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So we're talking a lot about new chicks. Let's talk a little bit about brooding. If you have to brood, indoors, a traditional brooder. Do you
Yeah.
have any of your favorite tips when it comes to brooding? Anything that a new chicken keeper should avoid when they're brooding?
Well, my number one tip is to think like a mother hen. Think about what mother hen provides for her baby chicks. Obviously, she's going to keep them warm. She's going to keep them safe. She will keep them sheltered. She will make sure that they're eating and drinking. These are all the things that you can do as a human mother hen, because that's what you are for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Um, and then, like we talked about before, exposure, gradual exposure to the outside world, to nature, that is very important, because they need to build resilience, and they need that gradual exposure in order to get immunity from the things in their natural environment. And we said earlier, there's all kinds of things in their natural environment. There's going to be protozoa, there will be bacteria, there will be viruses, all that. And we shouldn't be scared of that. That is normal. It's just that we want to build that immunity so that instead of them getting sick from those things, they build resilience from exposure to those things. And if you can't take them outside for whatever reason, you can go and get a clump of dirt and grass and take that and put that in the brooder, and they will play with that. So not only are you giving them some enrichment, but you're also giving them that gradual exposure that they need. And of course, you're going to make sure it doesn't have like pesticides in it or some kind of synthetic fertilizer or whatever. You don't want them to have that exposure. So just be mindful about that. Oh, what else? Don't overthink it. We've been doing this for millennia.
Yeah.
The main thing is that you don't want your baby chicks to get stressed out.
Yeah.
Okay. So, usually when they come to you, whether you get them from a farm store or you've ordered them from the hatchery, they have been through a bit of an experience by the time they get to you. And because of that, I will tell people, you have that initial cuddle session with them because you have to. Nice short cuddle session, especially for little kids, is very important. But then just kind of let them settle, for that first 24 hours. keep an eye on them, make sure that they're eating and drinking, but don't be picking them up every 5 minutes and stuff. You really want them to kind of just rest and settle in. They've done a lot of hard work. First of all, they hatched out of an egg, which is super hard work. And then they traveled, they might have gone all the way across the country. Okay, and that's a lot for a little baby chick. So, you're just going to let them be, and this idea of not stressing them out and being mindful of that, you're going to carry that through your whole flock's life, because that stress, I mean, we know stress will create disease, and it's kind of this cycle where they get stressed and they get disease, and chickens that are vulnerable will be more vulnerable to parasite infestation, and then parasite infestation can cause disease, and it's just like this cycle that you can get into, and we don't want that.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, just have fun and know that you're doing something that people have done for a really long time, and you can do it.
Yeah. Yes, you can do it. It
You
is
can
so
do it.
much fun.
Yes,
It is the best experience for
it
sure.
is. I might be a
Before
little biased, but it is the best experience.
it is. I love it. I'm all excited. I've got more chicks coming in a couple weeks. I'm so excited.
Yay!
Um, so before we talk a little bit, I want to get into talking about feeding our flock. But before we do that, you're an author. So I want to hear a little bit about your book and why did you write a book?
I wanted to write a book ever since I was a little kid. I was going to write the great American novel. I might still.
Yeah, about chickens.
Yes. But it was always in the plan to write a book. So it was just kind of the natural step. I had done the TEDx talk, I had the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel had really taken off. And then I was like, okay, this is it. Like, I have all this information. I really want to tell, more of a story. I want to get more into the meaning of chicken keeping while also giving people a good reference guide.
Yeah.
So that was how I wanted to differentiate it. And I think, oops, I just dropped something over here. I think I have achieved that,
Yeah.
but it's also, just um, communicating the meaning of chicken keeping. And I think that's how it differentiates itself from other chicken books, because there's a billion chicken books out there. But it's also a great reference book, especially if you want to lean more natural, because I'm certainly more natural in my chicken keeping. I do use herbs, I use homeopathics, and I definitely have a philosophy that we've been talking about, where we concentrate on exposure to nature and a more natural experience for chickens. So I have my book right here. For those of you that are, I know some of you are listening, but for those of you that are watching, oh gosh, here's my
Yeah.
book. It's
I
called
love it.
Let's All Keep Chickens.
Yes. I love the first thing I noticed was your amazing cover, and I see your naked neck chicken up in the corner there.
Yes, that was Roxanne. She
Aw.
was a good chicken.
Aw, that's so great. And it's so good. It's good to have a good reference for people. And I think it's important to share that natural side of chicken keeping
Yeah.
and like you said, we've been doing this for so many years and there are a lot of, giving your flock the herbs and the
Mhm.
exposure. Those are all really, really important things. So you have a happy, healthy flock.
Yes. Yes. And also that you're happy and healthy, because when we
Yes.
when we overthink it, think it, and we believe that we need like all these bells and whistles and everything, and we're kind of participating in this thing that isn't as natural and is using more resources, then that is stressful for us as well. And chicken keeping is supposed to be easy. It's supposed to like help you with the stresses of your life, not
Right.
add to it,
Yeah. Absolutely. It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
I always say it's fun. Just go with
Not
it.
I
You'll love
yeah.
it.
I'm not saying there'll never be a stressful experience. I've had
Right.
stressful experiences in the chicken yard. They are
Yeah.
real, and I've talked about them on my channel,
Yeah.
but the goal is always to have more joy than sorrow. You know,
Exactly.
that's about
Exactly.
balance.
And learning. You're always
Yeah.
learning. Every day I learn something new. My chicken does something different. An egg looks a little bit different, and I'm
Yeah.
constantly learning. And I love that. I love that part of chicken keeping is the education part of it for sure.
Yes.
So, speaking of natural, let's talk a little bit about feed. Do you ferment your feed at all?
I do, and in fact, that was kind of like what I got famous for initially.
Yeah. Yeah.
I made a video and it was the title that got everybody, but it was like, um, "Cut your chicken feed bill in half with this simple process." Yeah, and that was it. That was like the title. All of a sudden, that went viral.
Great.
And I was just talking about fermenting feed. And, I just feel like not only is it good just because obviously there's benefits to fermenting something, like you're making it the nutrients in the feed more bioavailable to your chickens. They're going to digest it easier. They will likely eat a little bit less of it because it is more nutrient dense. And also you're expanding the volume of the feed. And a lot of times people will be like, well, you're just adding water and that's just, adding volume, but they're losing calories. But that
Yeah.
is actually not what is happening through the process of fermentation. You are making the nutrients that's already in the feed more available to them.
Yeah.
So with every bite, they're going to get more than they would if it was just dry feed.
Right.
So I really feel like it's a way for, um, if you want to buy the super expensive, really high quality non-GMO organic feed, which is great, um, you are more likely to be able to afford it because you're making it last longer. And then even for the people that can't do that, if you can't purchase the most expensive chicken feed that is on the market, get the chicken feed that you can afford. And depending on the type of feed it is, you may have to check and see how it works. You should be able to ferment it.
Yeah.
And that will make it more nutritious for your chickens. So I just think it's a great thing to do. And we know that good gut bacteria is so important, um, for not just digestion, but for immunity. Um,
Right.
and also to keep them hydrated, especially in the summer. So yeah, there's just so many benefits to it that I'm the fermenting gal. I'm the
That's
I'm the
awesome.
chicken fermenting feed gal.
That's so great. I love when you put the feed into like a mason jar and you know how to it kind of expands in there
Mhm.
and it to me that's like such a great visual of you are extending the feed. You're not
Yeah.
only adding all these nutrients and the good gut health for your flock, but you can actually see it
Yes.
while it's working. So that's I use the mason jars mainly because I like to watch it ferment.
Yeah.
I think it's cool. I think it's really neat. So do you offer fermented feed? Is that solely what you offer, or do you kind of do a mix of like do you do mix or
Like many people, I go through phases.
okay.
Right now, I am feeding all fermented feed. That is their feed. They just get it's all fermented. Um, if I go out of town, I'll probably offer some pellets. I won't be fermenting. Um, but you can offer pellets and then get maybe a bag of nice raw feed and ferment a little bit of that and give that to them once or twice a week as a good nutritious meal for them. You can ferment scratch and give that to them as a treat that is like really nutrient dense and is great for them. So it's not like an all or nothing thing. Like you can totally ferment and have that be their main source of food, have it be fermented, but it doesn't have to be like that. You can totally supplement with fermented feed or fermented scratch, and that is fine too. So just find out what works for you and what works for your schedule, and do it and feel good about it.
Absolutely. Do you add any additional supplements to your chicken's feed? I know for me personally, I have a lot of ducks, so we have brewer's yeast here, and sometimes we'll sprinkle that into their feed. Is there anything that you use like that?
Yeah, I also have ducks, so I will, sprinkle nutritional yeast on their feed, not all the time, but a couple times a week, I'll do that, and sometimes I forget, and it goes more longer. I'm human.
Right.
I do have something called the conditioner that I get from, Redmond that I will add to the feed, especially. Oh, I had a situation last year where some of my chickens got into poisonous mushrooms,
Oh my goodness.
and I was so shocked. It
Right.
was our best guess as to what happened because
Right.
we could tell that something toxic happened, like there was
Yeah.
some kind of toxic event in my
Mhm.
flock. Um, and so what the clay does that they sell, the conditioner, it binds, it's a binder, so it will help to, like, remove toxins from their bodies. You don't wanna give it to them like, if your flock is on medication or if you have a chicken on medication, you don't wanna give something like that to them when they're on medication, or
Right.
you wanna give their medication away from something like that.
Right.
But that's something that I will use. I've been using that a lot like lately. I really like it. It just adds minerals to their feed. Um, herbs, thyme. I say like thyme, oregano, and garlic, which is technically a vegetable, um, but we
Yeah.
call it an herb. Um, those are great just for building immunity and resilience in your chickens. I like to just add those to, like, scrambled eggs, especially if they're going through a stressful period or if I'm bringing new chickens in.
Right.
Um, and I will also make electrolytes for my chickens. I have a video on my channel where I make electrolytes for them. That's great for the summer,
Mhm.
during a heat wave. And of course, apple cider vinegar. We add apple cider vinegar, and these are things that sometimes I'm really consistent at it. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not being consistent. I'm normal. I'm human. What chickens need above all else is shelter and a place to lay their eggs and a place to sleep at night and to not be stressed out. They
Right.
are highly adaptable creatures. So,
Absolutely.
keep that in mind. Don't make it too complicated.
Absolutely. And now you mentioned herbs. Now is a great time if you are planning a garden to plan a little bit of a flock garden. We've been recently talking about that here at Meyer Hatchery, and my chickens, they're well loved. They have their own garden here. So
Oh, yeah.
having those are
I seem to only be able to grow a garden for chickens. When I do it for humans, everything dies. But I see I seem to it's so funny because there's all these educators that they're like master gardeners. They keep their chickens, but they're like a master gardener. I'm like,
right.
"Look, I can keep my chickens alive. I will show you how to keep your chickens alive. Don't ask me
Right.
about my garden."
But the great thing about herbs is they're really easy.
They are so
So so
easy.
incredibly easy to grow.
Yes.
So that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, so we are talking about our fermented feed.
Mhm.
What about, do you offer your flock kitchen scraps?
Oh, yeah.
And what
So
are their
in
favorites?
Chickenlandia, we have something called the Chickenlandia Chicken Food Pyramid. And if you can you look pretty young, so you probably don't remember the food pyramid we had in the 80s.
Oh, I remember. I
Okay.
remember. Yes.
It was it's lousy. It was a lousy food pyramid. I mean, I think like Fruit Loops is in it.
Yes.
But my pyramid is great. So basically, if you can imagine like a triangle, and then there's three tiers, okay? The bottom tier is the chicken feed that is appropriate for your flock stage of life, okay? So I will say, here's something that I say always when I talk about this. There are many valid ways to feed chickens. For thousands of years, chickens ate what we wasted. Okay. And that is an absolutely valid way to feed your chickens. If all you can do is offer them kitchen scraps and let them have pasture, access to pasture and bugs and stuff, that is absolutely okay. Those chickens have so much better quality of life. Their eggs are going to be very healthy for you. I think in the interest of getting chickens out of factory farms, I will always say um, that it is however you can keep chickens and feed them, as long as they're not being harmed, it's okay with me. Okay. But there's no getting around that the chickens that we have today, the production breeds that we have today, they are not the same chickens that we had even 100 years ago. They have been bred to produce and produce the most amount of eggs really in that first year or two of life. Okay. So they have really high nutritional needs. And I know that a lot of people that follow me, like, they really want their chickens to live as long as possible. That's what they're thinking of. And then on the other side of that, or as well as that, they also want their chickens to produce eggs. Okay. So I think really the best way to achieve that is to have their base layer be uh, a good layer feed, or what, the best quality layer feed that you can afford.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next tier is gonna be kitchen scraps, mostly vegetables, low sugar fruits, really things that are going to be healthy. Like, if you're feeding your family healthy, you're gonna have leftover kale, you're gonna have celery leaves, you're gonna have the tops of carrots. Stuff like that is so good for chickens. And most chicken feed that people buy is processed, and when it's processed, it loses nutrients because it's exposed to high heat, so it loses nutrients. That nutrients then needs to be added back in. It is always a good idea for your chickens to get fresh nutrients.
Right.
That is kind of a no-brainer. Like, if we think about humans and what they should eat, we for us to eat like a pellet, you know, eventually if that was all we ate, that would
Right.
not be good, because there's a whole world of nutrients that we're missing when we're not eating any fresh nutrients. So definitely, uh, fruits, low sugar fruits, vegetables, mostly leafy green vegetables, sprouts, pasture, access to pasture, um, fodder would all fall into that. Okay. And then the top tier are treats. Okay. And that's where you're going to have proteins, grubs, mealworms, shrimp tails, scrambled eggs, stuff like that. Okay. And occasionally, a banana, like a
Right.
banana or a hot dog, or it's a high sugar, or like really high fatty stuff.
Right.
Um, and so that's how I describe getting used to feeding your chickens, because I think what it does is, instead of you having like measurements in your mind, like, oh, they can only eat a certain amount of, they can only have a tablespoon of such and such a day.
Right.
That is not how our ancestors did it. It was something that was kind of innate in them. It was like an innate knowledge that they had, and it was all about balance. So that's what I want you to do when you think about it in like the pyramid sense. You're not measuring anything, but you're creating a balanced system. And
Right.
so that's always the goal.
Yeah.
So my answer is yes, I give kitchen scraps.
Great. I love that. I feel like I've trained my flock to think treats are the kitchen scraps, so that's been pretty good. They know that bowl, that we have a
Yes.
silver
Yes.
bowl, and they know when it's time for kitchen treats, I call them.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. So kind of, I always say, if you have chickens, you're probably going to figure out what predators are in your area.
Yes.
And so we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So
Yeah.
you mentioned about, allowing your flock to, be out in the pasture and enjoy being chickens, but also part of being a chicken keeper is we need to keep them safe. So, what are some of your best predator proofing tips?
There will be no better predator proofing than you can do than a really good farm dog. Like, that is the number one thing that you could do. And even in the city, you could have a good dog that will keep things away from your chickens. Not every dog is gonna do that. My dogs do not do that. I have 4 dogs. They're all little. They are chicken terrorizers. So, they cannot be trusted. Never the 2 shall meet. The
Right.
dogs are kept separate from the chickens. So I have a predator proof run. Of course, that costs money. I
Yeah.
mean, you can do it at a much lower cost, certainly than what I did. You can do it at a much lower cost, but it requires a lot of planning. You really got to think ahead. You got to spend a lot of time gathering materials. But it can be done. So I don't want to discourage people and tell them that it's impossible, because it's really not. Um, the only way to keep them completely, if you don't have a dog, the only way to keep them completely safe from predators is to build a predator proof area for them to be in. And
Yeah.
there's predators I talk about in my book to think about their behavior. There's predators that will sneak in. They'll come through a little itty bitty tiny hole that you didn't even know. Oh, a weasel can fit through that hole. And weasels are
Mhm.
very destructive. Um, or they will dig underneath. If you might have fencing all around your yard, but a domestic dog or coyote can dig under that. A raccoon can dig under that. Skunks will dig under it. So that's something else to think about. So I will recommend burying some wiring down, like a foot down, or skirting it out along the perimeter of your chicken yard to keep those uh, digging predators out. Then you have predators that climb, raccoons. Like, if you have a fence and you have a tree next to the fence, I mean, raccoons, they have thumbs.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's scary. I call them the monkeys of the Northwest. Like, they
Mhm.
can I will say, if a 2-year-old can open your coop, a raccoon can. They can
Mhm.
figure it out. They're really, really smart. Um, So, yeah, we have to think about possibly having them in something that is covered, or maybe putting a hot wire around the top of the fence, something to keep those climbing predators out. And then you have birds of prey.
Yeah.
And that, especially out in the county, is really tough, because if you have, seeing a chicken out on pasture, seeing a flock out on pasture is absolutely beautiful. But out here, we have bald eagles, we've got hawks, we've got owls. That is always something to consider. So my my biggest tip is to think about how predators in your area behave, anticipate that behavior, and then create as many barriers as you can.
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't have a lot of money, you can stack up a whole bunch of rocks, or, if you have like extra brick or something, you can stack brick around the perimeter of your chicken yard to keep things from digging in. There's many different ideas that people have that you can find. Um, just from being on the internet for a day, you can find all kinds of ideas, but mainly it's about anticipating that behavior and just creating as many barriers as possible.
Yeah. Absolutely. And knowing what's in the area. I love that you mentioned that, because I think that it's so important. We
Yeah.
all live in different places of the United States or wherever we live, and predators are different everywhere. And they can find the teeniest, tiniest holes, or
Oh,
they
they
can
can.
dig up that piece of wire. You never would have thought in a million years that something would dig that up. So it is
Yes.
important to do your research, and I always suggest to do that research even before
Oh, yeah.
before you place that first order for your chicks. Learn what's in your area, so you know how to protect your new feathered friends that are going
Yeah,
to
and
be
I would
coming to your
say,
home.
yeah, most of the animals that are after your chickens, a lot of them are nocturnal.
Yeah,
So, just having them in an enclosed coop at night, a good secure coop at night that is closed,
yeah,
that doesn't have anywhere that the animals can breach it, the walls and get in, that is like half the battle right there.
Mhm.
It's not the whole battle, unfortunately, but it is half the battle. So you'll be much better off just doing that than
Yeah,
you would, leaving them vulnerable at night.
exactly. Exactly. You have been sharing so much awesome information. We have just a few more questions.
Good.
I love all of
Yeah,
this.
I'm here.
So, if there is, what is one thing that you learned that surprised you about keeping chickens?
When especially when I was researching for my book, I looked into my history, like my family's history, and I ended up learning a lot about my culture and, of course, a lot about myself.
Mm,
And in doing that, I learned a lot about other people. And so I really think that my experience with chicken keeping has brought me closer to my fellow human, which to me is like that's the most important part of it. I always say Chickenlandia, of course, it's about chickens, it's about chicken keeping, but it's also about humanity. And so I think that's the most important thing that I have learned is more about myself, and as a result of that, just more about other people, and that has helped me to develop, more compassion for other people, and just to realize that we all have that in our history. Like it would be very hard. I'm sure there's like some really remote cultures that don't have chickens in their history, but they
mm,
are few and far between. Like I could
mm.
probably count them with, one or two fingers.
Yeah,
Most people have chicken keeping in their family's history in a significant way.
yeah, yeah,
So
that is
I will
something.
say that chickens are humankind's most amazing common denominator.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. And you do start to I kind of went through the same thing myself of when I started raising chickens, kind of researching my own family. And you find little things of like, yeah, your great grandmother had them, or my husband's grandmother raised them and she's did the same thing that we're doing now. And I just think
Yeah,
that's really great, really awesome. So we talked about a little bit, we talk a lot about the happy parts of raising chickens,
yeah.
but sometimes there's days that they're a little bit more tough. And what is the most difficult decision you've had to make regarding your flock?
I I I feel like it always has to do with illness and death.
Mm,
That's really hard.
yeah,
Um, there have been times when I had like a really sick chicken and I'm like, should I take this chicken to the vet? And let me just say this, like I have taken chickens to the vet. Um, I am able to do that. I want to do that. We have chicken vets where I live. There's like more than one chicken vet where I live. A
yeah,
lot of people cannot take their chickens to the vet. I mean, it's like they're chickens. I can't take them to the vet.
yeah,
I completely understand that. In my situation, I have taken some chickens to the vet, but a lot of times I've regretted it because I was looking at this chicken's experience and I was thinking about it from my place as a human being.
yeah,
And so I'm like, to me, it's like, I'm going to do whatever I can to keep this chicken alive. I think a chicken's, their experience of life is different and they will always experience things as a flock. And, even a chicken that is on its way out, like where would it want to be? Would it want to be at the vet? I have hated it when my chickens died at the vet because I know they rather be with their flock. You know, and I think that they understand death and illness a little bit better than humans do. We kind of look at it as this battle and they will be like, okay, I'm going to go sit in the corner
yeah,
and wait, and I'm not going to eat
mhm,
or drink. I'm not saying don't treat your chickens. I certainly do.
yeah,
When I have a sick chicken, there's a whole process that I do. I will bring them inside. I will do certain things to try and nurse them back to health. But there's a certain point where it's like, okay, um, this chicken is not going to make it. And you can tell, like, their toes will be really, the toes curling is a
Yeah.
big sign that,
Mhm.
okay, that's they're near the end. And if they're just not eating or drinking, I won't do like I'm not going to put a tube in
Right.
their throat and make them, because that to me is like, it's usually futile.
Mhm.
Um, so letting go of the guilt when stuff like that happens, because I am a big guilty person. I don't know. It's like a
Yeah.
cultural thing or whatever. I feel guilty,
Yeah.
what did I do wrong? These chickens, no matter what, my chickens, other people who have backyard chickens, they have lived a better life than most chickens on the planet. Most
Mhm.
chickens on earth are in bad conditions. And we are here giving them this experience, this natural experience. They're scratching the earth. They're feeling the sun on their backs. They're breathing in the fresh air. Even if they just get that for a little while, it,
Mhm.
it is so valuable. It is such a gift. So I try to remember that. And I'm really good at giving that advice and not as good at taking it.
Yeah. It can be hard at times, but I've kind of learned, especially with, interacting with our customers at Meyer Hatchery and
Mhm.
other chicken keepers, you just I find peace in knowing that I did everything that I could.
Yeah.
And you're right. The chickens are amazing at knowing, okay, something's not right. I'm gonna go over here to my favorite spot. And sometimes I feel like we have to give our chickens more credit because
Yes.
they know most of the time not to eat things they shouldn't eat, or they
Yeah.
know when something's not right, how they're going to take care of it. And that's all a part of nature. And yeah, so
Yeah,
it's good
and
to
I
keep
will
that in mind.
separate, depending on what a chicken has going on, because
Mhm.
sometimes it's obvious it might be something contagious, and you don't want that
Right,
chicken with your flock.
right.
But if I have a chicken that is, not well, something going on, maybe something neurological or something going on,
Mhm.
and I've had all kinds of special needs chickens in my flock, um, I will keep them with the flock, like, they'll be in, like, a little coop or something, or a
Mhm.
little enclosure where they can see the flock can see them, they have, like, a little dust bath, they can eat, um, but they're not vulnerable to flock dynamics,
Right.
which can be brutal.
Mhm.
So, but that's where they will spend what they have left while they have a quality, somewhat quality of life. That's where they will spend, because I know that they'd rather be with their flock.
Right.
So I think thinking, I tell people all the time, think like a mother hen when you're raising baby chicks. And when you have a flock, think like a chicken.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, you have to channel your inner chicken.
Yes.
That's great. How do people react when you tell them that that chickens are a unifying humanity? How do they react when you share that with them?
I have a few cranky people that are be like, "Oh, well, you're really, it's not that deep." It's just like, "Okay, bye,"
Right.
"Boy, bye." Uh,
Right.
but most of the time, almost 100% of the time, people will say, "Yeah, I feel that. I feel that." Because most people want unity.
Right.
Most people, like, that is what's in their heart. We have a lot of forces pulling us apart, a lot. And I just try to, in my own little way, I'm not in Hollywood. I'm not making some big Hollywood movie. I'm not writing, I haven't written the great American novel, but in my own way, I'm trying to bring people together and bring more peace into people's lives by reminding them, hey, we do have this in common.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, most people are like, they're with it. They get it.
that's
It
great.
really resonates with them. And I think that's just like the gift of my life. It really
Great.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the chicken community is a very special community. For the most part, it's a very connected, very supportive group of people, and I've definitely learned that a lot over the last couple of years. So it's really really great to see.
Yeah.
I have one last question.
Okay.
Okay, what is one piece of advice? Well, I guess it's not a question. Well, kind of. What is one piece of
Yeah.
advice you would like to leave everybody today in regards to chicken keeping?
Well, in my book, I talk about the 6 rules for mindful chicken keeping. And, I use the term rules is like, I use that very loosely because Chickenlandia is not big on rules. Okay. But there are a few things that will help to guide you through your chicken keeping experience that will make things easier for you. And the number one rule is to follow your heart. And the reason I say that is because when you keep chickens, when you have this flock of chickens, it's like a mini society. There's going to be all kinds of variation and things that happen in your flock that are going to be completely different from some random person on the internet that has a flock. And you could have an experience there that is absolutely unique to your flock. And you may go onto the internet or go into a group or something and be like, hey, what do I do? And you'll get 20 different suggestions from highly opinionated people
Yeah,
saying you absolutely must do this or you must do that or you need to burn your coop down or they're all going to die. I mean, it's like it's intense
yeah,
sometimes. Okay.
gotcha.
And in those moments, what I will tell people is just tune that out.
Mhm.
Okay. Listen to your intuition. Listen to what is already there because, like I have said, this is within us. This
Yeah,
experience is within us. It's a natural experience. We've been doing it for millennia. You know, if it feels right, if you decide, okay, I want to do this, you make that decision and that's the decision that feels right, do it and be at peace with that.
yeah,
Go with your gut. Number 1, above what anyone says. I don't care if I tell you to do it and it's like, "Oh, that doesn't feel right for my situation." Then don't do it. Do what feels right. And you're gonna make mistakes. And sometimes we have hard lessons to learn in a chicken yard. And you can feel really guilty and be like, "Why did I do that?" It's okay. It's so okay. Like you're doing great. Keep going. You learned, your flock is not mad at you. You haven't wronged them. It's just this is what happens.
yeah,
Um so yeah, and I think there's a lot of different educators. Find one that you resonate with and stick with their philosophy, because it can just get very confusing if you go down that research rabbit hole. You can find all kinds of conflicting advice. So there's many, many different ways to keep chickens. And there's the Chickenlandia way, but it's not the only way. So find what works for you and feel good about it.
love it. That is excellent, excellent advice. Very good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I learned a lot and I really
Yay!
loved talking with you. So, very much appreciate it.
I really appreciate this opportunity. It's just great. I really appreciate you having me on. I am super excited about being on here.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, with that, I thank you for listening to the Coop. Be sure to subscribe. And if you would be so kind, drop us a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts and want to know if you have any ideas or topics you'd like for us to talk about here on the Coop. Be sure to drop us an email at podcast@meyerhatchery.com. We are looking forward to hearing from you. And remember, life is good because we have chickens.